Hi there, and welcome to Hiring Our Heroes Best Practices discussion on how to hire veterans and military spouses. My name is Rebecca Stroman. I'm Director of Business and State Engagement with Hiring Our Heroes. So if you have any questions after reviewing this deck and listening to me walk you through it, please do give me a call or send me an email. My contact information is at the end of this presentation. With that, this presentation is really designed to help employers discover the resources and strategies that we have outlined in our comprehensive employer roadmap. So this presentation is really meant to be a Reader's Digest version of what you can find online. So while you're looking through this deck and listening to the presentation, I would encourage you to go ahead and start thinking about creating your own account on the employer roadmap. And the URL for that is just employerroadmap.org. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Most of you who are already tuning in know why hiring veterans is important business, but oftentimes it's really important to kind of establish the business case, especially when you're trying to get executive buy-in within your organization. So while veteran unemployment numbers are not nearly what we experienced 5 years ago, there is still a surge, so to speak, of service members who are transitioning into the civilian sector over the next 3 to 4 years. We anticipate more than over 1 million service members who are projected to leave the military between now, 2015, 2016, and 2019 or 2020. Obviously, veterans and spouses have intangible skill sets that are invaluable to the business world, but are often lost in translation. But this is a unique group of highly capable individuals who possess intrinsic soft skills that sometimes can be miscommunicated or not communicated at all when translating those skills into the business world. So those employers who are dedicated to hiring veterans and spouses really need to take the extra step to apply military skills and translate them into civilian roles. So no matter the size of your business, no matter if you're a very small organization, and just kind of getting started in veteran hiring, or whether you're a huge company and you already are really well versed in how to hire veterans and spouses, you can learn a lot of different strategies and tools about veteran hiring as a whole from our employer roadmap, so do check that out. But your organization, again, no matter the size, your size of the company, you can always position yourself to make the most of these best practices. The content that we have on the roadmap is really designed to take you through a step-by-step process. So we broke everything down into 3 main buckets or steps. Prepare being number 1, recruit number 2, and empower. As you begin your journey on the roadmap, I would really encourage you to start thinking about step 3, the empower section. Even though it comes, so to speak, last in our content build, the more that you can start thinking about ways to retain veterans and military spouses while you're in the early stages of preparation, the more you're going to reap the benefits of your investment in military hiring. So start thinking about those earlier on in the preparation cycle, and it'll reap dividends on the back end. So within this prepare section, let's talk about how veterans and spouses add tangible value. So kind of elaborating a little bit on that business case. As you can see by this case study or facts here that we've outlined, here are a few of the examples of just that tangible value. Now, it makes sense that a veteran would work well in a team environment and possess a strong work ethic, an often undervalued example of those soft skills that are gained through military experience. Service members also receive a lot of dynamic, on-the-spot technical training via advancement opportunities or just a fast-paced environment that the military operates in. Now, finally, I can't underestimate these qualities enough, but integrity, professionalism, and adaptability. Not only are they characteristics that are a requirement within the military, but when you think about that, they would make such a great asset to your organization, and they would make your business that much more successful when applied within that civilian or business environment. Obviously, small businesses have unique attraction or appeal to veterans as well, because they're often able to do a whole lot more with a lot less. So obviously, continuing in that spirit, veterans are go-getters. They know how to do a lot with very, very little. If you can recall the story of Apollo 13, was a great movie, by the way, you know, service members are often faced with instances where they literally have to create a carbon dioxide filter from the contents of the kitchen sink in a tiny window of time and in a very high stakes game. They're familiar with these types of scenarios where they're expected to do a lot with very, very little. They work well in teams, they know how to adapt and overcome, and they can identify and handle risk much more naturally. All of these things make veterans and spouses too, to a degree, a wonderful asset to any organization, no matter the size of the business or the industry. So now that you've learned a little bit about why they make a great asset to your organization, let's think about how you actually translate or speak their language. Some of the categories of military ranks, we've got some examples on a crosswalk of this on our employer roadmap, but maybe the easiest way to think about this, if you're unfamiliar, is these three main categories. So the enlisted personnel, these are your rank and file. These are typically your doers. They're generally very well trained in a specific technical skill. Your commissioned officers, on the other side, they tend to possess a lot of leadership and management experience, and they're often the decision makers. As I mentioned a minute ago, we have a more comprehensive list of the translation of the military ranks. You can see kind of a snapshot here. But if you go to the employer roadmap and look on our case study section, you're going to be able to view, and in our download section as well, you're going to be able to view this. So take some time and read this over in a little bit more detail. Now, one of the most important things that you can do as you're building your strategy or your plan to hire veterans and spouses is start looking to the veterans and spouses that you already have within your organization. The veterans and spouses that you have within your company, they really are your greatest asset. They are invaluable in helping you craft a new veteran hiring strategy. For example, bounce some ideas off of them. Why did they come to work for your company? What makes them stay there? Where could your organization improve when thinking about hiring more veterans and spouses? They can also help you translate some of those military resumes that might not be exactly crystal clear to you quite yet, and they can also act as mentors for other incoming veterans and spouses. One of the things, you know, the military is one of those environments where a veteran will often want to go work or be associated with an organization where they know other veterans are located. So by creating that pipeline and those mentorship opportunities, you're going to be able to brand yourself that much more as a military-friendly employer, and that's going to make you that much more attractive to other veterans who are looking for great places to work. If they know their buddies are there or like-minded people are there, they're going to want to go there as well. That's just kind of the basics of thinking about step one, or the planning cycle. You can get a little bit more detail on some of the other strategies in section one, or the planning phase on the roadmap. But let's take a minute now and think a little bit about the recruiting side, so kind of step two. Now that you've laid a bit of the groundwork for strategies and goals you want to accomplish, you know, you've established why veterans and spouses are good for your business, how to translate their skills, how to speak their language, and how to really reach out to the veterans and spouses that you have within your organization. So now you're ready to start using some of those recruiting tools, and there's a lot of them out there. But one of the best ways that you can start is by creating a military-friendly website. Now, most job seekers in today's world, they're not going to be looking at hard copy pamphlets of why your organization is a great place to work. Everybody's going online. They're going to go online, they're going to do a Google search about your organization and find out what they can via the internet. So if you can create a military-friendly website, something that pops out to a job seeker kind of immediately right off the bat, that's going to appeal and going to be able to draw more of a veteran job seeker crowd to your business. These are just a few screenshots or examples of how some major organizations have been able to create kind of military-friendly branding or a veteran-friendly portal on their recruiting page. Here are a few tips on how you can think about creating that military-friendly website. Number one is, don't just lump veterans into the diversity category. Now, I say that because oftentimes, if you can make that concerted effort to not only celebrate veterans that you currently have on staff, but create a more welcoming environment for veterans that you want to attract in, and really establish the fact of why they're celebrated within your organization. It's not just a check mark to say, yes, I met this diversity classification, but veterans and spouses will be much more inclined to an organization where they go to an organization where they feel celebrated and empowered, and extra steps are taken to really retain them. So don't just lock them into that diversity category, but really think about ways that you can empower them. You also think about highlighting jobs that have already been identified as a good fit with a veteran and spouse. You know, there are positions out there that just, when you think about them, a veteran or spouse immediately comes to mind. Or you could also publish your mission statement and corporate values. Veterans, they come from an environment where everything is very mission focused. Disciplined, you know what's your job, how it translates into the overall good of your organization or your mission. And sometimes that can be lacking in the civilian world, or a veteran can feel that their civilian organization might be lacking in that area. So they will tend to gravitate towards those organizations that are mission focused. So if you can incorporate that mission statement or your corporate values onto that military-friendly portal, then do it. Now, this is a very key part of recruiting, is making your job descriptions attractive. Now, how do you go about doing that? Well, for one thing, before I even jump into this case study here, we have a very unique tool on the employer roadmap that does exactly that. It is a military-friendly job description builder, and it's designed in a tutorial format. So it will take you through kind of the basic steps of writing a job description and examples of do's and don'ts or tips on why you should write the language in a certain way. So please do check that out. We created that specifically to address this bottleneck that a lot of employers face, and that they want to hire veterans and spouses, but sometimes, you know, the language that's used in the job description doesn't necessarily come across as I'm trying to hire veterans and spouses. It just reads like any other job description. So if you're really trying to market yourself, you've got to start thinking about how you use the appropriate language. Now, these are some basic steps here at the bottom of the slide. Do your research, be inclusive, obviously promote the needed skills. But again, you can get like the deeper download on how to do this by checking out the tutorial on our website. The recruiting resources from our team at Hiring Our Heroes, we've developed quite a toolkit of resources to really help you meet those hiring needs among veterans and spouses. One of those, and I always encourage people to check out, are our in-person hiring fairs. We are approaching the 1,000th hiring fair here in early 2016 in just under 5 years. That's pretty extensive. But beyond just the in-person hiring fair, which we always have all of our events listed online, you can check out our virtual job scout. That is meant to be a complement, an online complement to the in-person hiring fair. You can access veterans and spouses 24/7 via the virtual job scout. All of our tools, you can find a comprehensive list of those on our website, and if you found this webinar, you know how to find those as well, but that's just hiringourheroes.org. Our dashboard really is one of the easiest ways to access all of our digital resources. So I would encourage you, after you take this webinar, to start thinking about creating your HOH dashboard, because this is going to give you access to each of our tools here that are spelled out in that screenshot to the right, the Resume Engine, CareerSpark, Virtual Job Scout, obviously the roadmap, and so forth. It's going to give you access to all of those at once. So rather than create accounts on each individual resource, you can just create one username and one password on the dashboard, and you'll be able to access all of the tools at the same time. So do check that out. This is another example of our CareerSpark, which is our our military spouse. We've created this specifically for military spouses to help them think about writing their resumes by including their volunteer experience over the years to address some of those gaps in employment history. And it's meant to be a mirror image, really, of our personal branding resume engine, which is our military translator, but it's also a database of veteran resumes that employers can search at no cost via zip code or keyword. Social networking, this is one of those things that's often undervalued to an extent, but networking is one of those really key components that we encourage every job seeker that we come across to start thinking about. Not only through creating LinkedIn profiles, but getting out there, and maybe you don't find an actual job at a hiring fair, but you turned it into a networking opportunity. So you're able to meet organizations and build relationships there that will lead to an employment opportunity. And you can do the same thing as an employer by turning that social networking into an edge. So if you have a Facebook page or a LinkedIn discussion group, that's another way that you can engage service members and spouses, particularly spouses. But because we are in a social media driven age, this is where you're going to be able to pull a lot of interest from these different demographics. So if your team, what USAA has done here, they increase their outreach obviously through their military blogs, LinkedIn and Facebook. That's another way. You don't always have to be posting about the jobs that you have available. Sometimes it's cool to list a personal interest story or something like that that kind of grabs attention. But as you can see, many, if not most, of recruiters use or will plan to use their social media in their job search efforts. And LinkedIn is really one of those main key social media avenues to do that. So if you can create a LinkedIn discussion group, then do that too. Okay, now that was a really very Reader's Digest brief version on ways that you can think about recruiting veterans and spouses. But in the interest of time, let's start thinking about how you can empower, step 3. So again, the more that you can start thinking about the empowerment phase earlier, say in steps 1 and 2, when you're preparing and recruiting, the more that you're going to be able to reap the benefits of your investment in veteran hiring. So one of the ways that you can think about retaining the veterans that you are recruiting into your organization is by helping your civilian staff recognize veterans within the organization. Here's a few pointers on how to do that. You can teach your employees kind of the military basics. Maybe you offer a brown bag luncheon on, maybe surrounding a veteran holiday like Memorial Day or Veterans Day or July 4th or something like that. One that can kind of bring a little bit more awareness to the veteran population and offer that brown bag luncheon as kind of a social opportunity not only for your employees, your civilian employees to get to know veterans on the staff, but to learn a little bit more about what does it actually mean to have served in the military. A lot of folks don't understand that, and it's important for your organization when creating that buy-in to start thinking about how you can incorporate all of your employees behind this mission. Obviously, you want to utilize the veterans you have on your staff. We talked about that at links earlier. But taking advantage of those digital resources, like some of the ones that we provide, we have a Military 101 webinar also on our website that you might want to check out, particularly for civilian employees who don't have a whole lot of experience with veterans or military spouses. You can also think about opportunities where you can dispel any of the myths around veterans. In this day and age, there's still sometimes pushback from employers on hiring veterans or pushback from civilians within an organization on hiring veterans because of veterans may have PTS or PTSD or traumatic brain injury, and that's really very much so a myth. More people in this day and age have PTS as a result of a car accident than veterans have PTS. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. But anytime you're able to offer those opportunities where you can dispel those myths and really kind of bring awareness or greater visibility to the veteran population you have within your organization, then it's good to think about doing that. Obviously, educating employees on disability issues and rights, that's another key area to think about too. And we have a webinar also on that subject matter if you'd like to listen a little bit further. Explaining pathways to advancement, that is really key when you're thinking about long-term retention of a veteran that you have hired onto your staff. So veterans, you want to really start explaining pathways to advancement that much earlier in the process because they come from an environment where it is expected, and in many cases, but expected that they will rise in rank or achieve a certain position after a certain number of years. And as we all know in the civilian world, that's not the case. But say, you know, an officer starts out as an O1 junior grade officer, and they expect to move into an O2 position within 2 to 3 years, and that's pretty standard across the line, across all the service branches. So, but that, obviously that's not the case in the civilian world. So veterans can often be frustrated by a lack of those written rules or clear paths for advancement. You know, say I have to start out at a position, if I'm a veteran, I have to start out at a position that seems a little bit, maybe a little bit of a step down from where I served in the military as far as rank and file goes. Maybe I have to start from a lower position to get my foot in the door, and then I can build my career up. If you can explain to a veteran or a military spouse, yes, maybe you do have to take a little bit of a bump, but if you get your foot in the door, it will lay out a clear path of advancement for them, or enhanced leadership opportunities or acceleration classes. If you're able to give them kind of the full spectrum of start at ground zero and build up to stage 10 and a rough idea of how long that will take, you're gonna see that by sharing those opportunities up front, they're gonna feel more empowered and want to stay with your organization longer. So offering those timetables for reviews, challenging them and presenting specific criteria for raise and promotion eligibility, just make it clear. That's really the key here, is just make it clear because that's really important. It's going to help them translate their military experience and be able to apply that same line of thought to their civilian job. This is a great case study about what Safeway has done over the past few years, but they created a training program for JMOs, or junior military officers, and senior non-commissioned officers that put them into one of these accelerated leadership programs. So this doesn't always make sense for every organization depending on your size, but it is a great example of things that you can do. So this is an opportunity to really find and identify those veterans who have had some leadership experience already, but maybe they need to take more of an entry-level type position within a civilian organization to kind of get started. But if they're able to process through an accelerated leadership program, it's going to open up other opportunities to them in a much shorter amount of time. So it's a great way that Safeway has been able to recognize and empower the veterans that they have on their staff and recognize the skills they bring to the table. Onboarding is really kind of a key area that employers can excel in as well. So by creating maybe an onboarding plan, following through with it, obviously when you're bringing somebody on board your staff, nothing's worse than saying you're hired and then just that veteran or spouse feel like there's been no communication until the start of the job. You want to ensure that you're creating that line of communication and that successful onboarding process. So think about creating a mentoring program like we mentioned earlier, using those veterans and spouses that you have on your staff who might want to be a mentor. They create a great line of communication, a great pipeline between your current veteran staff, obviously, and the folks that you're onboarding in. Establishing those affinity groups, employee resource groups, where they make sense, that's also another way that you can attract and empower veterans and spouses into your organization. Outlining the company structure, this gets a little bit tricky, but where it makes sense, again, where you're able to, if you're able to show, you know, kind of the outline of your leadership plan within your organization, you know, the chain of command, so to speak, that translates very, very well to your military audience. If they're able to see directly who they report to, and the person above that, and so forth and so on, it's going to help them communicate a lot more effectively. So if you're able to do that with your actual company structure and show how your departments work together within the organization, that's also often helpful. Obviously, keeping that dialogue and communication open and the following up, that's going to help you stay not only in touch with your veteran and spouse, but really get some good feedback on things that are working well or things that you can improve upon as an employer. This is another great case study by our great friends at USAA, who have really taken the extra step to help their new hires transition or on board with their organization. So this program, these two programs that are listed here, Combat Claims and Veterans for IT, they bring in new classes of those recently separated veteran employees, and they're all on board as a group. So I've got essentially a built-in support unit. If it's me and 8 other people who are on board at once, I've got 8 other new buddies that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And you're going to find that they will use each other, that cohort of onboarded employees, they will use each other as kind of another way to mentor one another and build that support network within your organization. Finally, and this is a very valued area of retention empowerment, is showing your support and celebrating military service. And that doesn't mean, it doesn't have to mean that this is just around those holidays like Memorial Day and Veterans Day, but there are little things that you can do to help celebrate your veterans that can go a long way. Now, I will say that not necessarily every veteran or spouse on your team will want to be known as such. I've heard many instances with organizations, and I know many of them personally, where a certain individual has worked for an organization for 30 or 40 years, they're retiring out, and you find out on the day that they retire that they're actually a veteran, and you would have never known because they never self-identified. So there's always going to be instances where a veteran or a spouse might not want to self-identify, and that's just the way it is sometimes, and that's not a bad thing. But just keep in mind that for those who do want to identify as a veteran or spouse, ways that you can recognize them, like in this picture here, what Starbucks has done with that iconic green apron is they denote their veterans and military spouses by putting an American flag on their apron. Lakeith, in a similar vein, they developed a thank you for your service pin that folks who have served in different, or served in a branch of the military, say Navy or Marine Corps or Army, they can say, I served in the Army, and it's a nice little lapel pin that obviously distinguishes them amongst their civilian peers, but it's one way that La Quinta has kind of developed to be able to recognize and celebrate those veterans because they're important to their organization. USAA, once again, great case study here, but they designed an internal employee community called VetNet to assist veterans and spouses, not only with support from the CEO and the executive leadership team, but obviously amongst themselves. It's a social and business support group, so it's used to share information with military-related events, offer mentoring opportunities, and establish focus groups for specific business needs. It's just another way that you can create that ongoing dialogue within your organization around veteran employment and veteran empowerment. Now, as I said, there are quite a few key steps that you can take as you think about everything that we've gone over in this presentation. We've outlined a few of them here for you. Obviously, I would encourage you, the top two, to create your HOH dashboard account at that URL to access all of those resources. And also, please do create an account on the Employer Roadmap, and you can download our Employer Roadmap workbook also at that site. The workbook really is, again, the most comprehensive source of information that you're going to find on best practices is on the employer roadmap. However, if you just kind of want to get the highlights or the snippets, a little bit more detail and a little bit more detail than what we covered today, you can check that all out in the employer roadmap workbook. It's going to kind of give you some pointers and hints on places to start. You also think about determining who in your organization is a veteran or military spouse. So determine those, or maybe you've got Guard and Reserve within your organization. They're also very key. But thinking of ways that you can encourage your veterans and spouses to self-identify, that's a great next step. Obviously, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter and, of course, create your account on Employer Roadmap. Now, finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you have any questions after reviewing this, or you've got some questions about the Employer Roadmap, please shoot me an email or give me a call. I am happy to address any questions or discuss any strategies or thoughts that you might have. I really enjoy doing so, so please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Megan. And thank you so much for joining me today. Best of luck.